Hello, welcome to the Richard Nixon Presidential Library and Museum. We are here to learn about President Richard Nixon and yeah, that's it.
The communists were camped out in Cambodia and they would bomb South Vietnam from there. So Nixon decided to bomb Cambodia in Operation Menu.
This was our docent. He was one of the very first Marines sent into Vietnam. He described it as hot and humid with lots of big mosquitoes.
Richard Nixon wanted to encourage peace, but he also wanted victory. And to do this, he employed a strategy of Vietnamization, which meant increasing support and training for South Vietnam's forces to enable them to take on greater responsibility for the war.
Something I found interesting was the Tet Offensive. It was a surprise attack by the Vietnamese, the communist Vietnamese on South Vietnamese, and it resulted in many casualties of Americans and South Vietnamese. And I've never heard of it before, so I thought it was very interesting.
Nixon was very influential in bringing prisoners of war home. This flag was created by a prisoner of war out of any bits of scrap cloth that he could find.
This tough decision is advising Nixon. We're going to do it on an all-volunteer force, and then they say to end the draft so that they're not continually taking people in this war, since he's trying to end the war there. And he decides to end the draft, but it takes 2 years to do that, and it officially ends on January 27th, 1973.
President Nixon had more flying time than any other president. He visited about 30 countries.
Regarding his foreign policy, Richard Nixon said, "Let us build a structure of peace in the world in which the weak are as safe as the strong, in which each represents the right of the other to live by a different system, in which those who would influence others will do so by the strength of their ideas and not by the force of their arms."
Ping pong diplomacy. Chinese Premier Zhao Enlai allowed the Chinese national team to take part in the 1971 World Table Tennis Championships in Nagoya, Japan. It was at this tournament where American player Glenn Cowan, pictured here, and Zhuheng Zidong had their chance meeting. Cowan accidentally boarded the Chinese team's bus. Finally, Zidong, the world champion, stood up, shook hands, and gave Glenn Cowan a scarf. This ping-pong diplomacy signaled a thaw in the cold tensions between the USA and China since 1949. This sporting event moment led to the meeting of President Nixon and Chairman Mao shortly after. This was a really important handshake.
This was the second-in-command leader of China. It was very important.
And due to this importance, Nixon had his hand out and ready to shake before he was finished getting down the stairs.
Due to Dulles not being willing to shake hands with a communist 25 years previous.
So why was this so historic? This opened up doors for what?
This opened up doors with trade in China, which goes on today.
Great. Anything else? Good? All right.
This is actually a real piece of the Berlin Wall, which was built in 1961, and it cut off the Eastern Europeans from the West, and it symbolized the Iron Curtain that, you know, cut them in half.
Very good. What do you think, Michael?
Find it very interesting how this side was full of graffiti, but on the other side, if you look, it's completely like clear because it was not permitted in that area. And how it's, you can see that example here.
President Nixon was president during all of the Apollo moon landings. He understood how important this would be for America.
This is Golda Meir. She is the 4th Prime Minister of Israel and the first one to be a woman. She was one of only 2 women to sign their Declaration of Independence.
And this is Anwar al-Sadat, and he is the leader of Egypt. Him and Golda Meir were bitter opponents. However, with their leadership, they found a way to pave the way for stability in the Middle East.
The 1967 Six-Day War between Israel and its Arab neighbors, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, ended in a decisive Israeli victory. Israel annexed territory from each of the vanquished nations. A series of failed peace attempts in the following years left the region even more bitterly divided. After the Yom Kippur War in 1973, the nations were ready to negotiate, and President Nixon stepped in to help.
In October 1953, Mr. and Mrs. Nixon traveled to 19 countries in over 2 months, and it provided very valuable foreign policy experience.
In 1958, the Nixons went to South America, but they were met by communist protests.
President Nixon actually won the presidential election in a massive landslide.
He only lost Massachusetts and the District of Columbia, otherwise known as Nixon. Hello? He can't talk right now. He's getting ready for his presidential summit in China. Bye, Mr. President.
This is Winston Churchill of England and Charles de Gaulle of France, both of whom Nixon admired greatly.
That is Richard Nixon's birthplace. This was Nixon's helicopter, and it took the historic trip to Egypt in 1964. 74.
This is the gravesite of Patricia Nixon and Richard Nixon. Patricia died first, and then 9 months later, Richard Nixon died. But what makes it kind of ironic is that Patricia was 9 months older than him. So